Chapter 1, Birth of Chaos. Helena Wade was no stranger to violence. A former Black Ops soldier, she had spent years in the shadows, executing missions with a precision that made her a ghost in the world of covert operations. But even the most trained warriors are vulnerable to betrayal, and Helena's fate changed forever when a mission went catastrophically wrong. Ambushed by an enemy she thought she could trust, her entire team was slaughtered, and she was left for dead. Abandoned, broken, and bleeding out, she was picked up by a shadowy government organization with an agenda all their own. They experimented on her, subjecting her to unimaginable pain in an effort to turn her into the ultimate weapon. Using gamma-infused serums and brutal surgical procedures, they altered her biology at a cellular level. The transformation was excruciating, but it worked. Helena's body became stronger than humanly possible, her healing factor allowing her to regenerate from almost any wound. Her senses were heightened, her reflexes faster, and her rage more potent than ever. She woke up in a cold steel cage, her body changed and her mind burning with fury. With newfound power coursing through her veins, Helena broke free from her captors. The government agents who had experimented on her had no idea what kind of monster they had created. She tore through the facility, her rage uncontainable, slaughtering everyone in her path. Her once controlled and disciplined mind was now a whirlwind of anger and revenge, and nothing would stop her from achieving her freedom. As she emerged from the burning wreckage of the facility, Helena made a vow: she would never again let anyone control her, and she would never again allow herself to be a pawn in a game she didn't understand. From that moment on, she became a force of destruction, an unpredictable storm of chaos. The world would come to know her as She-Pool, a mercenary, a killer, a walking nightmare. She wasn't a hero, but she didn't care to be. She was the weapon they had created, and now she would use it however she saw fit. No longer would she live under anyone's shadow, she would forge her own path in a world that had never given her a choice. Chapter 2, The Mercenary's Path. Freedom, as it turned out, was not synonymous with peace. She-Pool quickly learned that the world outside the government facility was just as dangerous and corrupt as the one she had escaped. With no allies, no family, and no clear purpose, she did what she knew best: she became a mercenary. Without a moral compass or a code of honor, she accepted every job, no matter how dirty, as long as the price was right. There were no rules to her brand of justice, just a simple contract: deliver results, get paid. Her reputation spread quickly. A mercenary who couldn't be killed, who could get the job done with brutal efficiency and without hesitation. She became a legend in the underground world, a name whispered by criminals and corporations alike. Assassinations, heists, sabotage, there was no job too dangerous or too morally gray for her to take on. If someone needed something done, they called She-Pool, and she always delivered. But her methods were unconventional. She didn't just get in, kill the target, and leave. No, She-Pool made sure her presence was known. She relished in the chaos, in the fear she invoked, in the destruction she caused. She was a ghost, slipping in and out of places without a trace. But despite her growing legend, she wasn't untouchable. Governments, law enforcement, and even rival mercenaries soon realized the power She-Pool wielded, and they came for her. But it didn't matter. She was unstoppable. Anyone who tried to challenge her either disappeared or became just another name on her growing list of victims. She was the ultimate weapon, one with a deep well of rage and an unshakable desire for freedom. And if anyone stood in her way, they would be crushed without a second thought. She-Pool's sense of purpose was as simple as it was chaotic. She didn't care about right or wrong, she cared about survival and power. The more she killed, the more she proved to herself that she was no longer a pawn. She had become a force of nature. But even in her relentless pursuit of power and wealth, there was a nagging feeling in the back of her mind. She was a mercenary, but what was she really fighting for? Was there more to life than destruction? These thoughts lingered, but She-Pool quickly pushed them aside. For now, killing and chaos were all she needed. Chapter 3: The Unwanted Attention. Legends are dangerous things. They attract the wrong kind of attention, sometimes from the right people, sometimes from the wrong ones. Sheepool's reputation had grown far and wide, and soon, it wasn't just criminals and corporations seeking her out. Governments took notice, sending their best agents to track her down, superheroes targeted her as a threat, and even other mercenaries saw her as competition. But none of them could stop her. She was a legend, and she was untouchable. For Sheepool, this was just another part of the game. She didn't care who came after her. The more they tried to capture her, the more she enjoyed the challenge. The thrill of being chased, hunted, was addictive. Governments tried to bring her in, but their best agents were no match for her. Heroes, well, they were a different kind of problem, self-righteous and blind to the truth of the world. But she wasn't a villain. She wasn't even a criminal. She was simply someone who refused to be controlled. They could label her as a villain all they wanted, but Sheepool would laugh at their attempts to stop her. Superheroes, for all their power, were the most amusing of all. They couldn't understand her motivations. They were too busy trying to stop her to realize that she was untouchable. Time and time again, Sheepool toyed with them, evading capture and taking down anyone who stood in her way. But despite their repeated failures, the heroes kept coming. Each time they tried, they only strengthened her resolve. After all, who were they to judge her? They were all just as flawed as she was, living in a world filled with corruption and lies. And so Sheepool continued her reign of chaos, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. She wasn't trying to be a hero or a villain, she was simply living on her own terms. She wasn't afraid of anyone, not the law, not the heroes, and certainly not the criminals. They could all try to stop her, but Sheepool had one rule: if you crossed her, you paid the price. It was as simple as that. Chapter 4: The Job That Went Wrong. In Sheepool's line of work, most jobs were straightforward. Take the contract, execute it with precision, collect the payment. But every once in a while, a job would throw her off balance. She had been hired to eliminate a high-ranking government official, a man involved in illegal bioexperiments. The money was good, the target was vulnerable, what could go wrong? But when Sheepool infiltrated the facility, she discovered the horrifying truth. The official wasn't just experimenting with dangerous tech, he was turning children into living weapons. The rage that had always simmered beneath the surface flared up, boiling over in an instant. These children had no choice, no freedom. They were being turned into monsters, just like she had been. The difference? They hadn't asked for it. Sheepool's anger was a weapon unto itself, and this time, it fueled her actions. She killed the target swiftly, but instead of walking away, she set about dismantling the entire operation. She freed the children and destroyed every piece of technology used to create them. She left no stone unturned, no trace of the dark experiments that had been carried out. She burned the entire facility to the ground, ensuring that no one would ever take advantage of innocent lives again. As she walked away from the smoldering ruins, Sheepool realized something: she wasn't just a weapon. She wasn't just a killer. She had a purpose now, even if it wasn't a noble one. She couldn't undo the past, but she could make sure that no one else suffered the same fate she had. It wasn't about saving the world, it was about ensuring that those who needed saving had a chance. But the truth was, Sheepool didn't know where her path would take her next. Chapter 5: A New Purpose. After her mission to destroy the bioexperimentation facility, Sheepool found herself in uncharted territory. The life she had built for herself was one of chaos and destruction, but for the first time, she started questioning it. She wasn't a hero, she had never wanted to be. But the realization that she could make a difference, however small, stirred something deep inside her. She continued her work as a mercenary, but her methods began to shift. She started targeting corrupt organizations, tearing down the structures that perpetuated suffering and inequality. It wasn't that she had become some kind of righteous crusader, but she found herself focusing on jobs that served a higher purpose. She still took the money, but now she also took satisfaction in the knowledge that she was leaving a dent in the corrupt systems of the world. She wasn't perfect, but she wasn't just a killer anymore. At the same time, Sheepool struggled with the idea of redemption. Could she be more than the weapon she had become? She wasn't sure, but she knew that there was no going back. She would never be the woman she had been, and maybe that was for the best. But as she fought her way through job after job, she realized something: there was still a part of her that cared. She didn't just destroy for the sake of destruction anymore. She fought because she believed, just a little, that maybe the world could be made better. Chapter 6: The Headhunters. As Sheepool's reputation grew, so did the threats against her. The mercenary world, as chaotic as it was, operated by its own rules. And one rule was clear: if you were too powerful, too uncontrollable, you needed to be dealt with. A secretive group known only as the Headhunters, an elite organization of mercenaries and assassins, placed a bounty on Sheepool's head. The reward was enough to make even the deadliest killers consider taking her down. But to Sheepool, this was just another challenge. The Headhunters weren't like the usual enemies she faced. They weren't just after money or power. They were an order, bound by an unspoken code. They saw themselves as the gatekeepers of the mercenary world, the ultimate arbiters of who lived and died. Sheepool had crossed a line. She had become a symbol of chaos that even they couldn't tolerate. And so, they sent their best after her. But Sheepool was ready. One by one, she faced off against the Headhunters, each more dangerous than the last. Some of them were skilled marksmen, others were experts in hand-to-hand combat, and a few even had abilities that made them nearly as deadly as she was. But Sheepool was no rookie. She knew how to outsmart her enemies, how to anticipate their moves before they made them. Every time the Headhunters thought they had her cornered, she turned the tables and struck back with brutal precision. No one had ever defeated her, and the Headhunters were about to learn why. In the end, the Headhunters' entire organization was left in ruins. Their leaders, who had orchestrated the bounty, were dead, and their agents had been wiped out. Sheepool didn't just survive the bounty on her head, she destroyed the entire network. The message was clear: no one could touch her. But with the Headhunters gone, Sheepool had made an enemy of an even larger, more powerful force. And she knew that the world would never stop coming for her. Chapter 7: The Rival That Wouldn't Die. The Headhunters weren't the only ones who had heard of Sheepool. A mysterious assassin known only as Deathblade had been tracking her for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. Unlike the Headhunters, Deathblade wasn't just a killer for hire, he was a master strategist, a man who thrived on his ability to outthink and outmaneuver his opponents. He saw Sheepool as a challenge, one he could not resist. Unlike the others who had failed, Deathblade had a plan. He wasn't just going to kill her, he was going to make her beg for mercy. Their first encounter was everything Sheepool had been expecting: intense, brutal, and strategic. Deathblade wasn't just another mercenary, he was a master of psychological warfare, using his intellect and precision to wear down his opponents mentally before they even laid a hand on him. For the first time, Sheepool found herself outmatched, not by force, but by cunning. Deathblade wasn't just after her life, he wanted to break her spirit, to make her lose herself in the battle. They fought across continents, through cities, forests, and abandoned buildings, each clash escalating in intensity. Every time Sheepool thought she had him, he would disappear into the shadows, only to return with an even more devious plan. Sheepool's resilience was unmatched, but Deathblade's relentless pursuit began to wear on her. He knew her every move, anticipating her next strike before she even made it. It was a war of attrition, and neither side would back down. But Sheepool wasn't someone who could be broken. She had learned long ago that survival was about more than just brute strength, it was about perseverance. So, she adapted, using her own unpredictable nature to her advantage. She baited Deathblade into traps, leading him down false paths and setting up ambushes. She realized that Deathblade's downfall wasn't in his tactics but in his arrogance. The longer the fight went on, the more overconfident he became, and that was where Sheepool would finally strike. Their final battle ended with Deathblade's defeat, his elaborate schemes unraveled by her sheer will to survive. Chapter 8, The Betrayal. Just when Sheepool thought she had earned a moment of peace, an old ally turned on her. A fellow mercenary, one she had worked with on countless jobs, betrayed her. It wasn't just about money or power, it was something deeper. Her former ally had been approached by a shadowy group with an agenda of their own, and they offered him something Sheepool couldn't have predicted, the promise of power beyond anything they had ever known. Sheepool, once again, found herself in a trap, one that was carefully planned and executed. She had never trusted easily, but this betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. She was captured, locked in a facility designed to break her. The people who had once been her comrades now stood against her, using every weapon at their disposal to weaken her. For the first time, Sheepool felt vulnerable. No longer was she the predator, she was the prey, and it made her feel a sense of dread she hadn't experienced since her transformation. But even in captivity, Sheepool refused to give up. Her mind was still sharp, and she began plotting her escape the moment she was thrown into her cell. The group that had orchestrated her capture underestimated her, believing her to be broken. They thought the pain and isolation would make her compliant. But Sheepool was no ordinary prisoner. She had spent her life in the shadows, surviving impossible odds, and now she would use every ounce of her cunning to escape. In the end, Sheepool didn't just escape, she obliterated everything in her path. She used the very tools they had designed to break her to destroy them instead. Her rage, once again, became her greatest weapon. Sheepool wasn't just a survivor. She was a force of nature, and anyone who crossed her would learn the hard way that betrayal was a dangerous game to play. Chapter 9, Breaking Chains. The betrayal had been a turning point for Sheepool. It wasn't just about the loss of trust, it was about the realization that she wasn't invincible, that there were people who could outsmart her, outmaneuver her, and take away everything she had fought for. But as always, Sheepool refused to stay down for long. She was a fighter, and no matter how hard life tried to break her, she would find a way to rise. Chapter 10. Laughing at the end of the world. After everything, every battle, every betrayal, every moment of pain, Sheepool stood at the edge of the world, a living testament to survival. She had come a long way from the woman she once was, but the truth was, she didn't know if she was better for it. Was she a hero? Absolutely not. But was she a force to be reckoned with? Without a doubt. She continued to work as a mercenary, taking on the highest-paying jobs, wreaking havoc on anyone who dared cross her. But now, there was a sense of purpose behind her actions. It wasn't about just making money, it was about creating chaos, testing the limits of those who thought they were untouchable, and making sure that no one ever forgot who Sheepool was. She had become something more than a killer. She was a symbol of defiance, a walking nightmare for those who sought to control the world. The world had tried to break her. The world had tried to use her, control her, and ultimately destroy her. But Sheepool had endured. She had survived. And as she laughed in the face of her enemies, she realized one thing: no matter how dark the world became, she would always find a way to survive, and maybe even find a way to make it a little more fun. In the end, Sheepool wasn't just a mercenary or a killer. She was the last person anyone would ever want to cross. And the world? Well, the world could just deal with her.